Well, speaking of some hatred there, although Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach have been downplaying it, Shane, let's kick it over to our interview with my buddy Jake Wimberly, the host of the afternoon drive there, 105.9 on ESPN FM in Jackson, Mississippi. Talk about Dan Mullen and the Egg Bowl. So let's kick it over to Jake Wimberly. All right, we're pleased to once again be joined by my man Jake Wimberly. Got to give him a follow at Jake Wim on the Twitter machine. And he is the host of the Afternoon Drive on ESPN 105.9 in Jackson, Mississippi. And of course, he's the owner of the CFB Hourglass. So, Jake, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate you on Egg Bowl week here.
Michael, always great to visit with you, my friend. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. It's gonna be a fun week of rivalry games, Egg Bowl, Iron Bowl, and you kind of go across the docket here. It's going to be a fun week.
Yeah, no doubt. This is right up there, man. This is one of my favorite weeks of the entire calendar. And it was, before we get to the Egg Bowl, it was a couple of Egg Bowls ago where all this went down, where Mississippi State got upset by Ole Miss. And next thing you know, Dan Mullen turns right around and leaves Starkville for Gainesville. So, I just wanted to wrap that all around and ask you, what are your thoughts on Dan Mullen getting fired? And are you surprised that, maybe not that he got fired. I think we all saw that coming. But are you surprised that, it fell apart so quickly for Dan Mullen?
I really am surprised that it happened so quickly. I mean, if you look back last year, we were sitting here talking about Florida playing for the SEC title, and they played Alabama as close as anybody. And you thought, okay, Mullen, a couple years back-to-back now, New Year's Six-Day Bowl games. And then, the whole shoe incident everybody laughs about with the LSU game. But then, the bowl game happened against Oklahoma. And then, a lot of people that didn't sit well with. And then, of course, the recruiting has not set well with people. And then, of course, losing some of the games that they lost this year and the way this whole thing, yes, I'm extremely surprised that it unraveled so quickly. But if you look back at just, some of his previous predecessors there in Florida, from Jim McElwain to, Muschamp and others, it kind of unraveled on those guys. Very similar, very weird situation, what's gone on at Florida outside of Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer over the last 25 years.
Well, speaking of coaching there in the Egg Bowl, Lane Kiffin, Mike Leach, two of the best coaches in college football. I believe they lead the SEC, if I'm not mistaken, this season in coach effect. I want to ask you, because I know you follow this as closely as anybody, who do you think's done a better job this year, Lane Kiffin or Mike Leach?
Man, that's a great question. And I think you have to look at it on several different levels. One, Lane Kiffin kind of did what a lot of people felt like he could do with his team. He was able to get the most out of Matt Corral, who has already mentioned that this will be his last regular season ball game. He's headed off to the NFL. And so, you check the box there for Kiffin. And, that he's been able to score a ton of points and make this Ole Miss team one of the funnest teams in the country to watch week in and week out. They win, on Thursday night, and they'll have double digits for the first time in a long time in the regular season. However, if you look at Mike Leach and you look at some of the, early season losses on the road at Memphis, lost the game against LSU that they very easily could have won. But then he rallied the troops and then gets a road win at Texas A&M versus Auburn, and the way that they've looked. I don't want to play that guy, but I really have to kind of just say both guys have done an unbelievable job, and you got to kind of, if there was a 1A and a 1B, I don't know who it would be, because both guys have done a wonderful job with both programs in state this year.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you put any credence to any of the smoke that's out there that Lane Kiffin could be leaving Oxford for, one of these big-time jobs, or do you think it's just a case of, this is the coaching carousel, and we all kind of get swept up in all this rumor and speculation?
Well, it's interesting because you look at it. We know this is the time of year where agents make a ton of money, getting deals for coaches and things of that nature. So agents are definitely working the back channels as they always do. Lane Kiffin is a very interesting person. We know that, and a lot of people want to go all the way back to his time at Tennessee and the way he left Tennessee and to USC. But that's so long ago now. And you look at Lane Kiffin, not really any off-the-field problems. He's been able, did a great job under Nick Saban, a great job at FAU. He's done a great job at Ole Miss. And, I think much like Dan Mullen, when he was in Starkville, you've got to ask, what is his ceiling at Ole Miss? And then what does he want in the future? I think Mullen wanted the bigger job. I think he aspired to win a national championship like all coaches do. Obviously, that didn't pan out for him. Lane Kiffin, I would have to say, I mean, you're talking about a guy who started his career in the NFL. He had a big coaching job at USC. I mean, he's been in some of these bigger markets and bigger jobs. He's got, assets and family and people in the state of Florida. I definitely think it intrigues him. I don't know, though, if he is guy number one or if he's guy number two. And a lot of times, as you know, these coaching searches, it sometimes is guy 2, 3, or 4 that takes the job. Is it the right fit? So it will be interesting to see. I do think that he is probably a candidate on that list. I just don't know where he falls in the pecking order and what his interest is, outside of Oxford and how long he really wants to stay in Oxford because, both Starkville and Oxford are much different jobs than they've ever been in that, the SEC money's there. You can pay coaches. You've got great facilities. You're in the heart of the best recruiting footprint in the country. So, does he want to battle Alabama and the SEC West every year, or would he want to go over to Florida and then have to just tangle with Georgia and maybe up and coming Tennessee? It's going to be really, really fun to see what Kiffin does and then what Florida does as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, circling back to the Egg Bowl, we've got 2 of the best quarterbacks, not only in the SEC, but the entire country, in Matt Corral and Will Rogers. Can you ever recall 2 better quarterbacks going head-to-head in an Egg Bowl? Because the only ones that come to my mind, Dak Prescott, Bo Wallace, but, I think even this is in a different class. What's your thoughts on this head-to-head matchup?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that matchup. We talked about this on our show, end of last week, beginning of this week. You go back into the 90s and Romero Miller at Ole Miss and Wayne Madkin, late 90s. Those 2 were pretty good quarterbacks coming through. They could finally throw the football, but not nearly in the class of these 2. You referenced Bo Wallace and Dak Prescott. There was the Nick Fitzgeralds that came along. There was the Chad Kellys that played in this game. But I don't think that we've ever had an Egg Bowl where you've got 2 guys that obviously Matt Corral is going to be picked up and he's going to be, in the NFL after this coming up spring. I think Will Rogers very similar on the same trajectory as a lot of Mike Leach's quarterbacks, Gardner Minshew and several others that will have an opportunity to play. So no, I can't think of a year, regardless of decade, where you've had, you go through and you had guys like John Bond that played in this game for Mississippi State. You had some others for Ole Miss. Obviously, Eli Manning played in this game, but never 2 guys on the same field at the same night. I think this is going to be fun.
Now, everyone's going to be focused on these offenses, but these are 2 of the most underrated defenses in the entire SEC. Which unit do you think has a better Egg Bowl performance?
Again, another great question when you're talking about defensive performances. For Mississippi State, they're going to have to stop the run. And, of course, Matt Corral, who has done a really good job, showcasing his ability to be a dual-threat quarterback. I think he'll probably amp that back up this week a little bit since this is the last game of the regular season. He's kind of taken the gas off some of that after the Tennessee performance about a month ago just to keep himself healthy. I'm sure that came from him and the coaching staff, Lane Kiffin and Jeff Levy and such. So Mississippi State's got their work cut out for them. Mississippi State has shown that they can, get off the field. They're a bend but don't break defense that played pretty well against Texas A&M. After a quarter and a half, they played pretty well against Auburn. So, I figure it may take Mississippi State a little time to kind of figure out what Ole Miss is doing. But for Ole Miss, the big question is, can they get pressure on Will Rogers? Because I think Mississippi State's wide receivers are some of the best that Ole Miss will have seen this year. And, they've seen some good ones. But if they can't get pressure on Will Rogers, then that's going to turn out to be a long night for that Ole Miss defense. And while Ole Miss, I think, will score points, I think the advantage defensively goes to Mississippi State, maybe getting a stop or 2. Whereas if Ole Miss can't get pressure on Will Rogers, then that could be a big problem for Ole Miss defensively.
And the Egg Bowl has been a series where home field has just played such a huge advantage in years past. How big of a factor will that play, do you think, playing in Davis Wade Stadium? And I know you're a huge fan of the Don't Stop Believin'. They're going to be blaring that. You know what?
Yeah, I love the Don't Stop Believin'. They'll definitely pump that into the stadium several times on Thursday night. The home field, I think, will be play a big part in this. I mean, it has for a number of years. And you look at Matt Corral's performances, he's obviously had some great home performances. The Tennessee performance on the road was really good. But outside of the Tennessee performance, he has played very average on the road. So, you've got Mississippi State coming out playing behind that crowd. If Ole Miss lets that crowd stay in the game and stay in the game early, I definitely think it could be a factor. And, of course, the Cowbells late in the fourth quarter, because I do think it will be a fourth quarter ball game. could definitely swing this game just a little bit.
All right, last thing for you, Jake. I really appreciate all the time you've given me here. Do you have a winner? Who's winning the Egg Bowl this year?
Yeah, CFBHourglass.com, where we like to put out, records and predictions like everybody else does, like you do, and especially when we start getting into March and April, and we want to start talking football way too early, which we love to do here in the South. I had Mississippi State as a 2.5-point favorite at home. I've still got Mississippi State around a 2.5 to 3-point favorite at home this year, even after the season, after we crunch a little numbers here. And I've got Mississippi State winning a really close ball game, 38-35 against Ole Miss. I think this is a game that's going to be played in the 30s. I think now if it rains and we get a wet field, then maybe that thing drops back down into the 20s. But I still like Mississippi State to come out on top, 38-35.
All right, he's Jake Wimberly, the #1 radio host out of the state of Mississippi on the Afternoon Drive, ESPN 105.9. Give him a follow at Jake Wim, and don't forget to check out CFBHourglass.com. Thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate it.
Michael, happy Thanksgiving. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, Shane, so I appreciate Jake hopping on the line, talking the big game there in the state of Mississippi. I already previewed it on the last episode. You missed it, go back and check that out. But wanted to ask you real quick your thoughts on this matchup, Shane. Ole Miss, Mississippi State in Starkville. Winner gets #2 seed in the SEC West. And hell, this is a battle of arguably the two hottest quarterbacks here in the SEC, maybe even the country. Although all of a sudden the SEC's got, Bryce Young, KJ Jefferson. There's a lot of good quarterbacks, but Will Rogers, Matt Corral, there's probably not two better ones going head-to-head this weekend. You know what?
Well, that's the thing, man. When's the last time you had two of these guys coming together with NFL quarterbacks? Because let's face it, both these guys are going to be playing on Sunday one day. That's just this. Both teams are riddled with talent, and what I like about it is it seems like Mississippi State, man, has picked up here the last few games, and they are on a tear. So having that and a hot Ole Miss, Ole Miss is always going to be competitive. I just think this is turning out. As much as we're pumping up the SEC championship, man, we should be pumping up this damn Egg Bowl, because you talk about a game, your coaches come out and they act like it's not a big deal, but man, these players, these fans, they know exactly what this is about. This is a bittersweet rivalry that they're going to be throwing around names for the whole remainder of the year. So hopefully no personal fouls. This doesn't come down to a ref or a guy pissing on a football, but then again, hopefully it does.
And of course, we can't forget the cowbells, man. It's down there in Starkville. Home field advantage. We didn't get it last year, obviously. That's a tough blow there for Ole Miss. They did win the game, though. But now we're getting back to the hostile environment. You got to believe those home fans are going to be a major, major advantage in a game that already looks like a toss-up, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is a pick 'em, man.